Hello guys, this is K-God here. This is my DBD tier list that is gonna have some basically what I'm just gonna rate on what we'll rate the killers by is basically just their base kit, no add-ons, their power, how well they can end chases, their map pressure and the mobility, if they can just ignore pallets and walls and obstacles and that kind of stuff, and the ease of use, which is probably where a lot of the hot takes are going to come, and that's totally fine. So let's just get right into it. Here is the first hot take. I think the best killer in the game right now is the Spirit. I think most people would put the Nurse there, and I probably would have too, but the thing is, let's talk about the Nurse first, and maybe you'll see why I put Spirit there. So Nurse is also I think in the SS tier, and actually I have to add one more row above. Okay, so the perks with the Nurse is that her map pressure is freaking insane. She can end chases really quickly. She can ignore walls and obstacles, so pretty much she's good on pretty much every single map. The only downside that she has is her power kind of just relies on you being able to see the survivor, and she's notorious for being very, very hard to learn. It does take a while to kind of get a grasp. However, you have the Spirit, who also has insane map pressure. She can end chases really quickly. She almost has no counterplay during a chase, whereas the Nurse, you still have like a few tricks up your sleeve you can do against a really good one. But versus the Spirit, you pretty much almost feel helpless, and it just feels like you're just trying to buy you're just trying not to go down as fast as possible to buy more time for your teammates, because there's barely anything you can do versus the Spirit, and she is pretty easy to play. It's not too surprising to see a lot of Spirits in red ranks. She's really freaking strong. What's her cons? I don't know. She can't go through walls, I guess. Really, she doesn't even need to see the survivor. You have the ability to just hear them, and you know exactly where they're at. You get visual indications anyway, if they're walking through grass or if they're bleeding. It's absurdly easy to not lose a survivor, whereas a Nurse, there are times when you can just lose them, but as a Spirit, you almost are never going to do that. And the reason I put the Spirit above the Nurse is because she's pretty easy to play. I think there's a lot of good examples mainly from fighting games where this is typically the case, where they put a character that's pretty easy to play and pretty freaking strong above the theoretical best character in the game. The one that comes to my mind is in Super Smash Bros. Melee, they typically put Jigglypuff over Fox, because she's more or less pretty easy to use. She's kind of safe. She has a tons of jumps. She has a one-hit kill move as long as you're above 10% and you have a pretty good setup for it. You can play so defensively with her. You just have to play her game pretty much. Whereas Fox has the reputation of Nurse, where he's pretty hard to master, but can arguably be the best character in the game, as long as you know how to use them. I guess another example would be when Leroy came out in Tekken 7, where he was pretty easy to use and his damage and the combos was pretty absurd, and he quickly became the best character in the game. until he got nerfed. And I believe this was still when Akuma was still pretty good, or maybe they had post nerfed him already. Ultra Instinct Goku, I think he's pretty easy to use as well. He's so busted as well in Dragon Ball Fighters. I think I saw someone talk about Bridget in Overwatch, or she was pretty easy to use, and she was just ridiculous. Had ridiculous damage. She was hard to kill. I mean, it's pretty much the case in all other games. If a character is really easy to use and they are extremely powerful, typically they're going to be the best character in the game because they're so easy to use. Like, think about it this way. Why would you ever put in the time and learn how to play Nurse when you could get the same results as a Spirit and not typically have to work as hard as you would with a Nurse? That's kind of where that mindset comes from. And I'm just applying it here in DBD. It'd be insane to pick Nurse over Spirit. So that's why I have her over the Nurse. But nonetheless, the Nurse is still really freaking strong. I do hope they nerf the Spirit somehow. It's not very fun to play against her to begin with. I do like her as a killer. I think she's great. It's just playing against her is just no fun at all. There's no kind of counterplay, and the good thing with Nurse is that there is still counterplay, so it's still pretty fun against a really good Nurse to play against. So let's see, the next killer I'm gonna put up, and these two are gonna be the only ones here in SS because they're so above everybody, and even the killers in S. That, you know, I think they're pretty much some of the only killers that can just ignore walls, ignore pallets, ignore obstacles. Like, pallets aren't really a threat to them that much. So to me, that a combination of all that just puts them in their own tier pretty much. So here's the S tier. I'm putting Hag next. Her map pressure is freaking insane. She can end chases relatively well, as long as she has pretty good trap placement. She's extremely good for camping, absurdly good. I guess that's kind of about it. Her power is just mainly the way that she can teleport across the whole map, and she can just she can down someone right away. Someone pops the trap and she's already over there, and she can down them right away too. She's just really freaking strong, especially late game when there's less gens to worry about. She just has to trap everything out, and it works in her favor. I think Odds had said it best, where if you had like a really good Hag with good trap placements at the end game, I don't think you're gonna be getting out. It's just really tough. Her cons are that pallets to the Hag are still pretty much a threat. If you're in a chase with her, she's pretty much an N1 killer at that point, unless she decides to put some traps down where she can kind of put pressure on you. And you can get rid of her power, but obviously you need flashlights, and not everybody's gonna bring a flashlight. So even with those downsides, I mean, she's still really freaking good. I don't think she's in the same league as Spirit and Nurse, but her power just balloons her up to S tier, which is pretty good. I don't like going against her, but you know, it is what it is. The next killer is gonna be Freddy. I think most people have him in A tier, but I don't know. I don't really agree with that, because he has a lot of the same qualities that Nurse and Hag have. He has extremely good map pressure. He can end chases relatively quickly with his snares, and his kit is just freaking insane. He has a teleport, he has snares, he has a fake pallet. His lunge is freaking dumb. His mechanic affects everybody with the sleep state, and his terror radius is kind of unclear, so it kind of helps him out a little bit. It's not like the Huntress, but just because of his kit, it's so good, and it doesn't help that he's pretty easy to use. I think Odds had also said that his kill rate is really freaking good. I think Freddy is just he's got a little bit of everything, and he does most things pretty well, which is why he's an S tier. The only cons I can really think of is that he has to kind of charge his teleport, but it's like a double-edged sword. He has to charge it, but he can also use it to scare off survivors off of Gen. He can't really ignore walls like the Spirit and the Nurse can. So he still has to kind of play the chase like all the rest of the killers do. Pallets are also a threat to him still. He can still get stunned by them, but because he has his snares, he can just trap up the place, and he can still keep moving while he's putting down snares. So it's not like it's ever a bad idea to put snares down. So I mean, he's got everything going for him. I like, he's not I think he doesn't need one of his tools in his toolkit, like fake pallets or a snare or teleport. I think if they want to kind of bring him down a little bit, they should remove one of them. But otherwise, he's not overly broken. That's not to say he might be with his add-ons and perks and all that stuff, but just him and his base kit, I think it's really freaking good, and definitely puts him above the rest of the killers, which is why he's also an S tier. And it's a lot to say for Hag with how good her power is if this all-arounder is below Hag, because at least with Hag, she doesn't have to teleport or anything like that, and she can just get a free hit with teleporting if someone activates a trap, and she just teleports and instantly hits them. Freddy doesn't have that luxury. His map pressure is a lot weaker than hers, but he still has it, and it's still insanely good. So that's why he's an S tier. So those are the last two killers in S tier. I'll explain it in a bit, but these guys just have stuff that the rest of the killers don't have, which you'll probably just see. It's mostly map pressure. So the next killer, an A+ tier, is going to be Oni. Let me see what I wrote for them. His power is gained through just chasing someone, so he's not wasting time having like Michael, like having a farm stuff. He doesn't have to be out of a chase. He can be in the chase, so he can still get a down, and he can still get his power within the same chase. And if he doesn't get his power in that same chase, he could just get a down, which is still just as good. His power is, basically, if he doesn't have his power, he would not be an A+ tier, because he's basically an M1 killer. And he's freaking loud too. You can hear him coming with his footsteps. His power just he brute force his way to A+ in my opinion. It's a snowball effect. He doesn't have to respect pallets. His walls aren't that big a deal to him. His movement is crazy. He's got good map pressure. It's a one shot. And a lot of times he can hit you through the window, he can hit you through the wall, he can hit you through trees. Yeah, this power is it's crazy. It's so good. I guess the cons are pretty much, the startup time that he has to, do a charge or to do the one hit AoE slam. It's pretty much only other pressure he has is that you want, as a survivor, you want to kind of heal against him, so you're not dropping blood droplets everywhere, because I believe they do stay a really long time in the match. And other than that, I guess he's kind of hard to use. I mean, his power is it's way too good. It's definitely not at the level of Hag, Nurse, or Spirit. I think he could be a good contender versus Freddy, but I feel like Freddy just has that constant pressure on all the survivors, whereas the Oni is usually just only on one until he downs them and goes to another one. So that's why I would place him here in A+. I think he's really close to S tier, but I don't see kind of the argument for it, especially because Freddy is a little bit easier to use, a lot easier to use than Oni. So to me, that kind of puts it above that. So here's the next
hot take.
I think the Plague is also in this tier. Wow, I sure do have a lot of explaining to do for this one. So the thing is with Plague, I feel her pressure is so freaking insane. You have to play how she wants you to play, right? Her downsides are that she's basically an M1 killer outside of her power. She can't end a chase quickly if she doesn't have the red power. She still has to respect pallets. She still kind of has to respect walls. And she doesn't have the map pressure or the map mobility that the killers before her have. However, her power, I think, is more than enough to compensate for that. So let's say that she never gets like a red power, right? She has one guaranteed, but let's say that she's saving it for later, right? She can basically, if she vomits on everybody, she reduces everybody to a one shot. Now granted, it is a time investment, but if you're any good with Plague, you're going to get it. And not only that, you can vomit on gens, you can vomit on people that are hooked, you can vomit on pallets. Basically, your only time that you need to get out of ASAP, kind of like her phase, like a phase 1 Michael, you have to get everybody vomited on. Once that is done, it is an uphill battle for the survivors, because you typically don't want to heal versus the Plague. Even though she did get that buff, most of the time you can go past, you can make it past the red power up and not have too many downs. And then after that, she kind of just becomes an M1 killer at that point. But the problem is, if they don't heal, she gets a ton of benefits. She gets free info just from hearing them vomit all the time. They can infect each other on the survivors. They puke on a gen. She knows where you're gonna be at, or she knows that someone was there because it's glowing green. It's really there's a lot of pressure on you, and especially if you're in a chase, it's pretty much like you're fighting just an M1 killer that exposed you or something, because you only have one hit versus her. Now granted, if you're fast enough, maybe you could beat her. If it's a good Plague, it's really hard, to be honest. This is just without like her actual red power, right? If she has a red power, she's basically a better Huntress. She can send the vomit in waves. So if the first wave hits, the second one for sure is gonna hit. She can vomit over walls. She can vomit over pallets. She can vomit over windows. It's a little bit slower than the Huntress, but you get so much more hit boxes out that you have a better chance of hitting the survivors. And it's insane. You can down more than one survivor if you vomit right. That's why I think her pressure is pretty freaking insane. I think this one is probably the hottest take of everything I have here. It's definitely arguable, but I think just her map pressure alone from her ability is really freaking good. It's like a Freddy, probably like a slightly better Freddy, because you actually have to deal with it. So that's why I have her here in A+ tier. I think it more than compensates for her having to be an M1 killer during the chase, because she doesn't really have to worry too much about getting 2 hits, whereas everybody else is gonna have to worry about getting 2 hits. So the next killer that I have here is gonna be the Huntress. Where Huntress kind of excels from everybody here, I believe, is that she can end chases pretty quickly. It's not as quick as the previous killers, but if you're really good with range hatchets on a Huntress, if you've ever faced like a really good Huntress, it's hard to do anything because she just knows where you're gonna be. You can time the hatchets. Missing hatchets isn't really that punishing for her. She doesn't have to ever chase you. She can just hit you with hatchets. She's in the unique position where she can hatchet you, and she's just close enough. You can't make that much distance from a hatchet hit from up close, so she's definitely gonna get a follow-up hit on you. Pallets aren't too much of a threat against Huntress, because if you're gonna drop one, that's kind of a free hit for her, because you're gonna get stuck in the animation. She can threaten for free just by holding her hatchet. She has an unclear terror radius, so you never really know where she's coming from. You just know that she's coming. Her downsides are just having to grab hatchets, and when she runs out, she definitely has a high skill cap. There's a lot of maps that have obstacles, that have bullshit hitboxes that'll just stop your hatchet even though they should just go over. Her movement is, she's one of the slower killers, and I guess she kind of needs movement. She kind of needs to be able to see where the survivors are at. But honestly, these downsides aren't as crazy as they sound for the Huntress. I think facing a really good Huntress just kind of illustrates how helpless you can really feel versus one, especially if they're able to get, you know, cross map hatchet hits, just pressure you in general without even being there. I think she's really good for that, and it puts her in the unique position where she doesn't really have to ever be close to you like pretty much the rest of the killers here. Everybody usually has to be close to you to get a hit, and she doesn't really have to worry about that too much. So that's why I think she's the best killer in this A tier. And the next killer I'm going to put is Pyramid Head. His map pressure is pretty cool, but it's not that big a help. It does give you kind of some info with the trails that he leaves behind. He can end chases really quickly. It's not like his pre-nerf self where he was, I think he was straight up busted, but it's still good enough where he can do it. He doesn't really have to respect walls and pallets that much, because he has his power, and if he's really good, he'll get you through those. He has a fast hook mechanic. Chase pressure is still really good. He can still threaten you with the line, the trail that he does. But his downsides is that survivors kind of have to step on the trails to kind of give him a boost into his power. It's still really good if you still get like one cage through the match, because that's time saved, and time is your best resource as a killer. It is costly to use your power. If you miss, you know, you're gonna feel it. You're wasting time if you don't get the hits right. His mobility is, you know, slower as well. He does need vision of survivors as well. His map pressure isn't, you know, it's really not anything, kind of like the Huntress. Well, the Huntress has a better one arguably, but just the fact that Pyramid Head has the power to end the chase quicker puts him leagues above the killers below A rank, which is kind of how I tend to separate some of these tiers. And A plus, you know, those killers just have tools that they can use to, you know, they're basically have tools that the A ranks do not have, which, for example, Oni has great map pressure. He has a one shot. Plague has really good map pressure and just pressure in general versus gens and survivors. It's kind of a pseudo one hit mechanic, but, you know, that's kind of how I separate those. So moving on, the next killer I'm gonna put is Bubba. Doesn't have any map pressure. He has to walk to get anywhere, but just his chase potential is so good. His chainsaw speed when he's using it is absurd. It's an instant down. He has tons of charges. The charges shouldn't even matter because they come back quickly anyway. Pallets don't mean anything. He can kind of ignore walls because he doesn't get hit by them. His chainsaw just ignores them. He can hit some survivors through windows with the chainsaw. They time it right. He's a pretty easy character killer to use. His capping potential is probably the best in the game, maybe apart from Hag. He can down more than one survivor with his chainsaw. He's just absurdly good. Even though he doesn't have all the tools that the killers before him have, his chase potential is so good, it kind of carries him up to the A ranks. So I believe this is a really good spot for him. I think I had put him lower before, but upon thinking about it, I think he's definitely up there with Pyramid Head and Huntress. Again, really, Huntress is really only the top because she has range, whereas the rest of the killers kind of don't, except maybe Pyramid Head, but not even then, not really. And Bubba just doesn't have the range for it. He has to be up close, but he has a one shot and he moves fast as hell with a chainsaw, so I think it's really good. So he's kind of a
hot take
as well, maybe. The Doctor I think I'll just go through his cons first. He's kind of hard to use, kind of hard to master because you do need timing a lot. He's an M1 killer essentially, and he has no map pressure. However, his power lasts throughout most of the game. You will see illusions all the time. You will have wonky ass skill checks. He gets free information the whole game, from his static blast, from his regular charge blasts. If you're level 3, you're going to be screaming. If you have illusions, he can actually see when an illusion pops up for you, so he knows you're there. And his chase pressure is really freaking good. He can end chases relatively quickly. He still has to respect pallets, but if he times it right, he doesn't have to do anything. He can force you to drop that pallet early just so you don't get a hit. But once that pallet is dropped, it's really hard for him to get the hit for you, except if you're gonna vault the pallet, which he can get you with the static blast and you can't do anything about it, which is where I think his biggest strength lies, where he can deny you trying to loop the same pallet or the same structure, which is why I think he's really he's good enough to be this high in A tier. I think most people put him a little bit lower, a little bit or maybe like in B tier, but I think given all his powers, I think it carries him just enough to do it. But he is relatively hard to use, but he could honestly switch places with the next killer, Billy. So Billy has extremely good map pressure, even post nerf. He has the instant one hit, and the pallets really don't mean too much to him. However, he is essentially a worse Bubba. His chainsaw will get hit by walls and will stop him. If he misses his chainsaw, it's very punishing for him. You really can't mess up as a Billy because you want to just try and snowball as much as possible and get one hits as much as possible and put pressure on the rest of the generators as much as possible. Kind of like pre-nerf Hillbilly. Pre-nerf Hillbilly was freaking crazy. I know it was always kind of a drag facing him just because he was just everywhere at once. He was always a threat. Whereas I think the Billies that we see now, it's kind of like a pseudo Billy from like pre-nerf. But I think he's still good enough to be an A tier simply because of his one shot and because he has the map pressure and the map mobility that the rest of the killers don't really have. Aside from maybe one other person or killer, but you'll see. So that's why I have him here. I wish I could put him with Bubba, but unfortunately that's not the case. So the next killer I have is Blight. I think Blight is a relatively balanced character. I think his power is super dumb and doesn't fit the game, but it is pretty fun playing against him. He has really good map pressure, really great map mobility. Pallets aren't too big a deal because he can just charge them and hit, though he does have to kind of commit to it. But other than that, he's kind of an M1 killer. Maybe there could be an argument for B tier, but honestly, the way he moves across the map, I think carries him just enough to be along with the rest of the rank 8 killers. He's great. He's just a solid killer. This one's probably a hot take. Deathslinger. What's to say about him? He can pull survivors back with his ability. He has an easier time threatening, which is what a lot of people see is kind of his main issue playing against him, and I tend to agree. It's not really fun having him pressure you with the gun because it's kind of hard to dodge their hits because it's a pretty fast shot. What else can I say about Deathslinger? That's pretty much his power. It's just being able to shoot you and getting a hit off you. The thing is, he's basically just a worse Huntress. You have to reload after every shot. If you miss, you become a M1 killer. It's not like Huntress where you just have hatchets. You have no map pressure. You have no map mobility. If a survivor drops a pallet against you in a loop, there's nothing you can do. You have to go for the M1 or you have to try and catch them running around the building and shoot them that way. Because if you shoot them across the pallet, you're not going to get a hit. You're just gonna put them in the bleeding state or whatever. It's kind of, it is what it is. I could see him being in B tier, but just because he's that threatening with his power, puts him in A tier. He can relatively end chases pretty quickly, if you're good enough. So he's definitely A tier in my opinion. For B tier, honestly, this killer is very I don't know. I feel like he has the toolkit to do everything he needs to, but for some reason, it's just not good. It just doesn't work out the way that we all want it to. And I'm of course talking about our boy Demogorgon. He's got a teleport. He's got a dash attack. He can break pallets. He's really good in chokeholds, kind of like Deathslinger. If you're in a narrow hallway, there's really nothing that the Survivor can do. And you can boop him, which is great. But where does he go wrong? Why is he not an A tier or even A plus tier with his ability? It's kind of hard to come up with an answer for this, but from what I've noticed, everything he does is pretty freaking slow. It's a big time investment just to do anything, to get the ball rolling. And if the survivors are good enough, your powers as Demogorgon is just completely negated. You don't have teleports. The only thing you have is the rake attack, and then you're an M1 killer. That's about it. And that tends to be the case a lot versus Demogorgons. Their toolkit is there. It's just we can't do anything. He's like a worse Freddy. Like, why would you play Demogorgon when you could play Freddy? Freddy, who doesn't have the you don't ever really take away his teleports from him aside from completing gens, but it arguably helps him. He has snares. He has a pseudo lunge attack because his freaking lunge attack is so stupid. That's basically it. Demogorgon is just kind of a worse Freddy. And because he has to do everything slower, he takes time to put down the teleport. He takes time to do the teleport. By the time he finishes, the survivors already know you're there, so they can go off and hide, or they can run off. You have to charge up your dash attack. It's kind of easy to bait out. I mean, it's just really unfortunate. I guess to buff him, maybe they just need to speed up some of his stuff, possibly, because theoretically his toolkit is supposed to be really freaking good. I think it's probably one of the best in the game as well. It's a teleport and a dash attack. I think that's a pretty solid killer right there, but I don't know. That's going to be kind of tough to balance, but that's why he's in B tier and not kind of anywhere else. He could be argued to, for A tier, but the killers down here don't really have the pressure that everybody else does up there, or a power that compensates for that pressure. Demogorgon does have really good map pressure with the teleports, but it just takes so long to do anything with it. I've seen really good ones, and believe me, the pressure does get to you, but as soon as you start getting those portals out, he's gotta spend the time to put those back down again, and time is valuable as a killer, which is unfortunately, I guess, what holds Demogorgon back. But that's my kind of opinion on it. I'm not too sure why his toolkit isn't as good as it sounds, so that's why he's in B tier. But he definitely does do everything better that the rest of the killers after him don't. Here's the next one.
Hot take.
Pig. I think this is mostly theoretical. I think most people put the pig way down below. She has a mechanic that affects mostly every player to release the cage. It's really freaking good. It forces a player out of the game, essentially, to kind of to get rid of the cage so he doesn't die. And that's really good early game, because having a 3v1, if you guys have ever had that, when someone disconnects or something and you have 5 gens to go, it's just really tough because the killer's going to be chasing one of you and you only have 2 people on gens. She has a dash attack. She's kind of stealthy where she can crouch around and stuff, but again, it's kind of slow. She's pretty slow. She doesn't have a cross map feature like ability or anything. She's basically slow. She's an M1 killer and chases aside from the dash, but the dash attack is pretty easy to, not easy, I guess kind of easy to avoid. It's pretty predictable, so it doesn't really help her too much to get out of that. The thing is, yeah, her mechanic is really freaking good, but there's been a lot of nerfs to it to where it's a little tougher to get pressure out. So in case you guys didn't know, if you're caged, the timer doesn't actually activate until a gen is complete. So if you're caged and there's not a gen complete, you can just go do another gen. So it's like there's no player taken out of the game. Her mechanic is heavily RNG. You, as a pig, you always want them to, you know, make it to the last cage to be able to get rid of the cage. But a lot of times that's not the case. And that's the thing with the pig, is that you're basically buying yourself enough time as the pig to be able to win the match. And at the same time, it's an uphill battle because you don't have tools to kind of close chases down effectively like the other killers before her do, which is I guess the big issue right there, right? But again, just because of her mechanic, I think puts her above the other killers, where at the very least she can still make stuff happen with that mechanic. So that's why I have her up here, but she could easily be C or D tier. Let me know what you guys think. That's just my opinion with pig. I don't think it's set in stone, to be honest, but I just see the kind of the potential in her. I don't know. So the next one is gonna be Legion. Legion. His ability to have everybody injured is really freaking good. It's a lot quicker than the plagues, which is for sure, which is basically his power. You just want to always be pressuring people, always. He can kind of ignore pallets as long as his power up is up. He moves pretty quickly, so he can kind of traverse the map a little bit better. It's not the greatest, but it's still really freaking good. But aside from that, he's an M1 killer, which is a common thing you'll see with the rest of these killers. Everybody else before them has something that kind of makes them stand out from being an M1 killer, a power that will carry them out of being an M1 killer. He can get his power knocked out really easily. You just have to stun him, or you just have to make a miss, and there goes his power, and then now he's an M1 killer after you. So, and again, if he's chasing you when he has his power up, it's not using it efficiently. He has to just pressure everybody. That's his main thing, and a lot of Legions don't really do that. I think the biggest problem with Legion is that if you're up against a really good survivor group and you don't get the pressure going as soon as possible, like let's say you just straight up miss your hit on one of the survivors right at the start of the game, and you're stuck as an M1 killer. I mean, you're an M1 killer, dude. You don't have any pressure on anybody. Everybody's kind of just free to do what they want to do. You want to just injure people so they either have to deal with getting healed down the line or as soon as possible. But if you don't ever get that going, you're kind of hosed. You're just an M1 killer at that point. But he's up here this high simply because his pressure is so good. You can't really avoid, you know, not getting hit by him and having this race against time versus him, basically. I hate going against him. I just don't know why. I don't like going against Legion. I guess his mechanic is just more annoying than anything, but that's just kind of the way he's supposed to be played, so it is what it is. So that's the last three for this group. So next, in the C tier, I'm gonna have my boy Michael Myers. I love Michael, as does the rest of the community. I think he is arguably the most fun and the most balanced killer to play against. Not necessarily on the killer side, but versus a survivor, I think he's always a blast to go against, and he's arguably the one killer I don't mind having no ed. I just don't know why. I know he kind of needs, he doesn't really need it, but it does help him, you know. But anyway, let's just get into it. His phase 1 is silent, so it's always great to get your phase 1 kind of out of the way like that. It's a pain in the ass against really good players because they won't let you get past phase 1. His phase 3 is 100% what puts him in this group, because otherwise he would be D tier. His huge lunge is crazy. It is really good. His faster vault, and then I don't know if you get the movement speed with them or not, but I know you get a faster vault, and it's a one hit down. And it doesn't go away after one. You can just keep going if you wanted to and snowball. But that's his main thing, just the phase 3, and that's why he gets him put this high. However, he is this low because he's an M1 killer at the end of the day. He doesn't have anything else to end a chase quickly. His phase 3 is the way to end a chase quickly, but he still has to respect walls. He still has to respect pallets. He still has to respect windows. Windows maybe not so much because he can get a lunge out of it, but it's hard just for him to finish a chase, and you need to finish a chase as Michael as soon as possible. You cannot waste a lot of time on a chase. That's just the way it is. He just has no map pressure whatsoever. His mobility sucks compared with everybody else. He just has everything going against him. And as to my point earlier, where it's not necessarily as fun for a killer, is that you have to work so hard just to get somewhere. This is especially the case versus really good survivors. You can work so hard, super fast, perfect plays, but the best you're gonna get is maybe 1 or 2 kills. Maybe if the survivors mess up, you can punish them for that, but other than that, like, I think at this point in this tier list, like, it's just really hard just to get stuff going. It's still possible for sure, but it's really hard, and unfortunately that's what Michael has. I think a good buff to him would be completely skip phase 1, or just make it so you can get past phase 1 as soon as possible, because the more time Michael has, the better it's going to be for him. But phase 1 is just a pain just to get out of. I don't know what else we can do to kind of buff him without making him really stronger, breaking him out of that kind of quote unquote balanced killer in the game persona that he has. But yeah, my boy needs a buff, man. I love playing Michael. He's great. He's really fun. Everybody loves him. I don't think I've ever encountered someone super toxic to Michael, just because he's just that much fun to play against. So I don't know, maybe they'll buff him up or something. So the next killer after him is Ghostface. I don't know, I guess you can kind of change Michael and Ghostface around, but honestly, he just kind of does the same thing that Michael does. The only upside he has is that you can kind of expose 2 different people. You can 99 half the team for later on. I think that's really great. But the problem is that after that, he is an M1 killer. He will not have the luxury that Michael has with phase 3, where he's got a bigger lunge. He's got tools to kind of help him. Ghostface just has to M1 his way to a down. He has to respect pallets. He can't end chases quickly. It's just hard to get stuff done because he's an M1 killer. I mean, that's kind of just the way it is, man. But I mean, he's not bad. His power is still really good, but compared with everybody else, it's pretty much now I think these are gonna be the 2 hot takes right here, mainly for one of the characters, one of the killers, but I'm putting Clown next. I don't think he is the worst killer in the game, even though most people do say he is. I don't think that's the case. I think his power is extremely good. His bottles can be used to end chases really quickly. You can close off loops. You can close off pallets. You can force pallet drops. I think it's really good. It's just really freaking hard to use him because he's an M1 killer. He just doesn't have anything else to close the gap. I guess he can kind of, close loops faster. He can slow people down and get a better hit, but there's nothing in his toolkit, unfortunately, that will get him that down as quickly as you would want it to, which is why I put him below Michael, because at least Michael has that phase 3 to help him out. Ghostface has exposed to help him out. He doesn't have to worry about 2 hits, but with the Clown, aside from the add-on, you have to get 2 hits, and it's hard to get 2 hits when your only means is getting a bottle with a slowdown. And most good survivors will just loop you. They'll just chain structures on you, and there's not a lot you can do as a clown. It's kind of unfortunate. Even though his power is theoretically like really freaking good, it just doesn't seem to work out that way. We'll see what the buffs maybe if it gets any better, but I think for now he's at least C tier. I don't think he's, you know, one of the worst killers in the game. I just think he has a lot of work. You have to work on him a lot, man. It's crazy, man. Speaking of which, the twins. To be honest, I don't really know where to place the twins. I know she's definitely not like a high tier killer. She could probably be in B tier, but honestly, she's just an M1 killer. Her power is just Victor, who can just run fast. She's got pretty good map mobility. You can down survivors with Victor, which is really freaking good. You're a pretty okay camper. It's pretty easy to camp with the twins, but her power is just Victor. And the thing is, you can't hook people with Victor. You can just down them. And a lot of the times, by the time you get to that survivor, they're either good enough. They've set themselves up to get pallet stun. They set themselves up to get a flashlight save. You have to make your way over to where you got the kill, and a lot of the times it's not really going to help you. You waste a lot of time being that far away from the survivor. I think you would be better off just being an M1 killer rather than having Victor, right, do everything. I think she's really only good when you have a ton of injured survivors and you can just go ham and pick everybody off. But aside from that, like, you know, I don't really see that happening against really good survivors. Like, and I don't think it helps. I don't know if this is still a thing or not, but Victor can get you in the lockers. At least the last time I played against her. I don't know if they patched that out, but she can't get you. Like, your power is nullified by a locker. Like, you could just camp him out there and just have, you know, I forget what her name is, come down into the locker to get them. But by that time, you can just risk getting away from Victor. I don't know. She could easily be D tier. She could be B tier. I don't know. I think it would be a good spot just to put her in C tier. But the thing is, she doesn't have anything to end a chase really well, because you have to spend time to switch to Victor to set something up. And at that time, the survivor's just gone. So I just don't think, you know, it worked out the way that behavior thought it would. I thought she was going to be really good, but she's just simply not. So now we get to the last killers, and if you know all the killers in the game, you can kind of guess who's going to be going here. So I think the Trapper is definitely the worst killer in the game. Not necessarily that he's bad, but compared with other killers, he's definitely the worst. The Wraith has a mediocre ability. He's able to move fast. He's pseudo invisible. He's okay map pressure, okay chase pressure when he comes out of the invisibility. But after that, he's an M1 killer. There's nothing he can really do past that. But just because he can actually move faster is, I mean, I guess it's good enough just to make him a little bit better in my eyes. And I guess in chase too, you can kind of use it to your advantage. But you know, he still has to respect pallets, still has to respect walls, has to respect obstacles. Like, it is what it is. And here we go. Trapper is the last one. His traps, the reason I put him last and not over the Wraith is that his traps don't really help him in a chase. If he's caught in a chase, he's straight up M1. He has to waste time to put a trap down or to bait a trap, and the killer can just, I mean, the survivor can just leave. He's great when you can place your traps around, kind of like Hag, right? But that's plenty for the end game, and you don't have a lot of traps to really make that big of an effect. And a lot of the times you can just ignore the traps altogether. If you trap up, like, let's say one of the houses in Michael Myers map, you can just straight up ignore that map or that area of the map, and a lot of times you'll be fine. A lot of times as a trapper, you'll have traps on the other side of the map that go off, and you can't really do anything about it because you don't have the map mobility to get over there fast enough in time. I just think just because of that, he's definitely a lot worse than Wraith, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's bad, as you can see with OSTS video, or well, OSTS in general, where he's really good with Trapper. Aside from that, like, everything that Trapper can do, one of the killers above can already do better, and they are not limited by just being an M1 killer. So just to kind of summarize, I guess, kind of below A tier, I mean, these are pretty much M1 killers in some form or another. Section of Demogorgon, I think we discussed his problem already. So these guys in A tier have something that makes them not necessarily an M1 killer, or something, or a power that carries them through being an M1 killer, like in the case of the Doctor. And then A plus, these killers have something a lot more that helps them, that just has way more pressure, and it's a little bit more better than A tier killers have. And then S tier is just great all around her. They're just really freaking good killers. They got everything. They can do everything better anyway. And anyway, like, why would you play killers in A tier when you could play S tier? And then it's SS tier with the Nurse and the Spirit, to where their powers are so good they don't really need anything else. They have the map ability, they have the map pressure, they can end the chase really freaking quick. They're really hard to play against. They're really good. And with the Spirit, it's, you know, just easy mode, man. So that's my tier list. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned. I'm K-God. I'm from the Bifty channel. It's just the crew, my friends that typically play. So check them out. I have my own channel here, covering DBD stuff, but honestly, I'm trying to just be a variety kind of channel. So if you like that, please subscribe, give it a like. Let me know what you think. I know a lot of these are really debatable. There's a lot of hot takes, so kind of go ahead with it, man. Thanks.